Hello there, Matt Petrowski here, making these videos under the name of QWERTY just because I've got the domain and I'm a little bit nerdy and I like doing my own stuff, such as building my own house with SketchUp. I'm not a licensed architect, I'm not a builder. The only claim to fame I have is that I am a son of a general contractor, and so I was just on the job site a whole lot growing up, got familiar with a lot of the trades, and just learned it's not that complicated building a house. So let's take a look at what we're learning today. All right, here we are in the model. We are taking a look at putting up the walls and getting things sort of starting to feel like a house. I've got a super rough floor plan right here. Of course, in my model, we're going to be getting to the point where I came from nothing in SketchUp to what I'm at right here as a stage, and then we'll be evolving the house that I'm building here. I'm going to go to a top-down view, which I just used Command-1 there. On Windows, I think you'll have to establish the keys of Command-1, Control-1. In the previous video, we talked about the walls and how the outside walls are different than the inside walls, and they're really dependent on where you are and how much insulation you want. On the outside, you're preventing the outside elements from coming into the house, but inside the house, you've got your interior walls. In fact, good terminology to know is, I believe they call this the building envelope, and that is everything that is on from the outside on the inside. One of my goals with this house is to build it as a passive house, which incurs a little bit of an increased cost, but we'll see how close I can get. In fact, if you are working in the passive house industry, please leave comments below and subscribe, and I will be creating these videos as I go through this process, and I'll be talking about what I'm putting in and the things that I'm watching on YouTube in order to learn about building a passive house. Now, just as a refresher, on our floor plan here, I wanted to show you really quickly. In the previous video, we used the offset tool by double-clicking into one of the squares for our floor plan, selecting the face, clicking the offset tool, and clicking on any edge and then starting to drag. In this case, I don't care about the size of this room being absolute, so I'm going to go in instead of out. I'm going to hit the tab key and type 5.5 inches because I'm dealing just with the exterior wall that I want here. For the other walls, I'm going to get rid of them by simply just blending them into the edge. And I believe this is the case. I believe when I click on this object, which I hit the spacebar, selected right there, now I hit the M key, and I'm going to move this. I believe when I drop this edge onto that edge, it may disappear. We can see that by simply selecting and then deleting. And when we delete, we can see that because those lines were directly on top of each other, SketchUp conveniently for us said, oh, these are the same points, 2 points with a line in between, and I'll just go ahead and make that one line. So that's how I get rid of walls that are not exterior walls. Just simply offset to whatever you want for the exterior, and then move. And let's go ahead and blend this one as well so that we have just our exterior walls. So we have two options now when it comes to lifting these walls up. In SketchUp, we have this absolutely wonderful push-pull. In fact, I have to say that this is probably the one tool that the first time you use it in SketchUp, you're just like, oh my gosh, I can make things real. And that, it is a benefit. In fact, there's the master SketchUp guy, I forget his name right off the top of my head. He worked with an architect, which you'll find all kinds of stuff out on the internet. Nick Sonder, I do remember his name. Sorry, Master SketchUp. I'm going to learn all of your guys' names as I go through this process. He has a really good method of doing this. And as a computer software programmer, I know that the more complexity that you have on screen, so like this model, when I go over here and I go to this side area and I expose these walls and I turn off all of the wall cladding and turn off the gypsum and turn off, I believe my sheath is off. Yeah, it's already off right there. All of these things, by the way, we are going to learn about the coolness of the Medique plugin, which allows you to see all of your framing and all of the gloriness. But the whole point here is this model, unless you have a computer that's powerful enough or a graphics card that's powerful enough to really fly through everything, the more complex your model gets, the more your computer bogs down when you're working on a super complex project. So, the stuff that over at Master SketchUp and Nick Sonder came up with is they work with really primitive things, but we've got a difficult balance that we're trying to strike here when we're building our own house. Number one, we want to know the actual absolute material costs so that when we go to a builder or to a framer, if you're working directly with a subcontractor, you're able to say, I know how many linear feet of lumber I need of 2x4s, exactly of 2x6s. And you can get all of that. In fact, there's extensions that will pull this out. There's one called Quantifier Pro, and there's also one called Estimator. We'll take a look at those later in this series, but right now we need to get these walls up. Now there's two ways, as I stated, to do this. You can use the native SketchUp tools, or you can use what I chose to do, which is use the Medique plugins. There's also another one, I believe it's a gentleman named John Brock, and he has one called Framer, which works in conjunction with his Estimator plugin, which I just mentioned. Estimator and Quantifier Pro are the two that I know of that builders use in order to determine the actual costs of things. And I, as an owner builder, am going to be interested in those actual costs. So if we're going to go the SketchUp route, let's go to this. Let's focus on this one point right here. So in order for SketchUp to work with this, and how did I get those walls off? They're off by a little bit. Let's use our tape measure here and see what's going on. So we'll go from there to there. That is 5.5, 5.5, and then we'll hit the escape key. We'll go from here to here, and that's 4 and 15/16. So that is not a value that I need. I actually need to bring that in line. So let's go ahead and select and move that, which I will move right here. I'm going to lock in my axes right here on the green arrow, and then as I move this, I'm simply going to, what's really cool is once you lock, you can move your cursor anywhere else. So I can move my cursor to this point and it will pop on that particular point. So now when I click out of my bounding box right here to get out of that object, I should be able to use my tape measure and say I'm getting a true 5.5 wall. Now the 5.5 is just accounting specifically for the actual lumber. On the outside of the wall, you've got this all these other things called cladding and sheathing, which this is the point of my video. We're going to learn about this. If, however, we're using the approach that I believe Nick Sonder uses, and the whole point of keeping your model simple is from an architectural standpoint, it makes it really easy to make modifications. The native SketchUp tools are absolutely wonderful for making super quick modifications. So in order to get all of this to be something where I can use the push-pull tool in order to pull up the walls, I pretty much need it to be all one object. So the whole point of doing this is, as I zoom out here, is once we get this generalized layout, we're going to make a copy of this layout. And you want to be as precise as you can with the specifics here. Let me move this in and just get that connected. So we want to have this be as close to what we want so that we can go on to the next stage. And the next stage is we want a copy of all of this so that we can work with it at a later date. Now, what I like to do is I like to keep things on the same working plane that I'm going to work in. I could push this all the way up the Z-axis, but I can also put a copy of all of this over to the other side. And it looks like my master bath became disconnected there. I'll have to reconnect that. Go ahead and get rid of it for now. So, selections. Selecting is super important in SketchUp. There's two ways that you can select. Notice when I click here with the cursor, I can click and go in this direction. That's from the left to the right, or I can go from the right to the left. Now notice there's a big difference in the selection there. When I go from this direction, this is a marquee that means that everything has to be enclosed within this rectangle. This is a marquee that everything that falls underneath this marquee will be selected. So you'll see that as I select right here, what it's going to do is it's going to grab these two objects, but it did not grab this object over here. Likewise, if I zoom out and I really only want this one room, rather than using the right to left, I'm going to use the left to right and fully enclose it, and you can see that that is truly the only thing that's selected. In fact, it didn't grab this label because even the label did not fall within that selection. So if I go outside of this and grab that, well, it still didn't get that label. Maybe it's not part of the selection tool, but the whole point is, if I want all of this, I can either zoom out and then select all of it like that, or I can, as long as I know where my selection is going to be, just simply make sure that everything passes underneath it in order to grab all of it. And so now I'm going to be able to make my copy of this. I'm going to hit the M tool to move. I'm going to click a point to drag, and you can see down at the very bottom, I believe I'm covering it actually. It's down here underneath me, but you can read whatever a tool is going to tell you to do. In this case, on the Macintosh here, I can option. So in this move, I can start to move, but if I hit the option key, it's going to make a copy of all of this. And I'm going to drag this. Again, that pan tool, the first video I ever shot about being able to move while you're working with tools, that is so critically important, being able to pan with that middle mouse button and the shift key. So now that I have a copy of this, this is where I need to start, at the very beginning stage. So at this very beginning stage, you want to come up with something that is going to be your organizational model. Now, I've got a blending here. I need to move all of these into this. I am working with SketchUp 2021. It introduced this concept of a tag folder, which is super helpful. But in prior versions, you don't have that. You simply have just a straight list of what they used to call layers, they now call tags. We want to be able to organize the whole of our solution in a way that is efficient and useful to us. So you'll see here in my basement, I'll give you the overview. I have the whatever the item is, naming them so that it groups together is really good. So in here I've got a basement, then I have my basement areas, which the areas is what I'm calling my floor plan. These are just my regular rectangles where I am basically starting to form my walls. I want a copy of those, and I will put those on that layer, and then I will tend to turn that layer off, keeping the original rectangles of my objects. Then I will have the walls that I'm going to put, and that's where we've got the exterior walls and the interior walls. I put each of those on their own tag, or as layers as they used to call them. This ICF is integrated concrete forms or something like that. I forget. We'll get to that point where this is part of the way that I want to insulate my basement in order to get to a passive house. So with this copy, and the way that we're going to do this now is, if we're going to use the native tools, we are going to explode all of this so that it all becomes blended. So with one fell swoop with the selection tool, I can marquee around all of these. They're all selected, and I can right click now, and I can choose this one option of explode. Now, explode is the inverse of what we did when we grouped all of these objects. But in this particular case, we want to explode all of them in one fell swoop, because what it's going to do is it's going to automatically now blend all of that geometry. This is what we were trying to avoid when we had individual squares that we were trying to move around to arrange our floor plan. Now that we've got our floor plan arranged, now we can actually go in and get these so that we can use the push-pull tool if we're going to use, I'm going to call it the Sonder method. So we need to address the push-pull in that it only works across just one area. So we can see right here that I can simply just select. I don't have to double-click to go into a group. This is now all blended geometry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my line tool and my eraser tool in order to create and join things where things would be a consistent object if I'm going to use them all as one. So the two tools we're using are these right here. We're using the eraser and the pencil tool. So the eraser, I believe, is E. Yep, if I hit that, I can erase this line in between here, knowing that this is my 2x6 or my 5.5 wall, and I'm going to be able to simply just extrude that straight up. So we'll do it right here as well. I will simply erase that line. I'll hit the L key to create my line. It didn't quite connect that edge right there. Connected that edge. We'll zoom out. Let's pan over, see if I need to do it anywhere else. There's an area right there. We're going to simply make sure all of my walls are connected, go back and forth between my line tool and my eraser tool, erasing everything so that we have all of our external walls. And that's going to give me pretty much what I want to use the push-pull tool now. So I do have some of my interior walls. I would be able to get rid of that. We can see that my label jumped off of my kitchen, but I'm pretty much finished with these labels at this point. I would be able to get rid of these because I'm going to put cabinets in the kitchen, the family room, I'll put a sofa, etc. So here is the main difference between the two walls. I chose to use the Medique plugin because it taught me about construction. And the Medique Walls plugin, we're going to go through that in another video. I'll throw out one initial wall, but we're going to just use the native push-pull. And when I select on this and pull up, I of course have all of my exterior walls. You can see that it's even taking my interior walls right here and here up the edges. We can always get rid of lines or faces if we want to with the eraser tool, put them back with the line tool. Here again, I get to make a choice. Now, from a construction standpoint, we're going to go through the Medique plugin and why I chose to use it for creating my walls, because it allows me to get closer to what reality is and what it needs to be. But if you know that you want to just visualize this, then you can just hit the tab key. Notice that I made my first click and I haven't made my second click. We'll hit the tab key and I'll say I want a 10-foot wall. So there's really high walls. I think I went with a 9-foot wall on mine because the combination of my vaulted ceiling in the back of the house that I'm designing is going to have a 9-foot plus an 8-foot. But in the next video, what we're going to be covering is the Medique Wall plugin. And I'll go ahead and click this really quickly. The Medique Wall plugin is something that builders will use, but we will draw out a wall really quickly here. You'll see that as I draw this, it's really cool. It draws the wall out. I let go. It shows you all of my framing. But on top of that, what it teaches you is what goes into the building process. And this then leads you down the path of being able to search, Google, and other things and learn about what your options are when you want to build your own home. Case in point, I'll use the edit here to edit this wall. In order to bring that up, all of the settings, there we go. Oh, that's an edit opening, my fault. On this wall, I need to right click on the Medique wall and choose this option of edit wall assembly. So here's where you learn about building your house. As you scroll through this dialogue, this has all of the construction terminology. You learn about all of your wall starts. So the start corner, here are the different types of starts, which are also the possible ends for your walls. Outside corner, inset, inside corner, inset, T-corner, terminal. And then you've got these treatments, California, 3-stud, 4-stud, etc. When you're building your house, the number of options, decisions, and choices that you have to make are just crazy insane, and you're going to have to become familiar both on your area and how you want to build your house, what you're going to need. But the cool thing here is you can even select some of these things. For example, sheathing. Let's take this word as an example. I can right click on this, and this is all HTML. I wish it actually had the open in new tab, but I can right click on this. I can choose copy, or I can use Control or Command C if I'm on Windows, copy, and basically just go search for that term in order to learn all the different things about the sheathing. In fact, we're going to learn that I am going to be using a zip system, which is an integration. It's an exterior insulation, but it's an integration of some insulation with the actual sheathing, with the water protective barrier, and how that actually keeps your house from basically getting wet, and destroying over time. But that's enough about walls. We'll cover the Medique plugin in the next video and go over that, and basically just start to lay out our walls on our building. All right, see you next time.